All right, everybody, get ready. Because today we are diving into the world of negotiation.
Oh, yeah.
It's something I think we're all kind of fascinated by, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's this hidden language we use every day, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah,
We're negotiating everything, deadlines at work to
right.
like what's for dinner.
It's true. And you know what? We often think about negotiation just in terms of like big business deals or hostage situations like you see in the movies, but
Right.
it really isn't everything we do.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so excited to dig into Never Split the Difference today.
Yes.
This book by former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss,
Right.
it really breaks down negotiation in a way that I think anyone can learn from.
And what's so unique about his approach is that he brings this incredible real-world experience,
Mm.
right, from the FBI,
Yeah.
but he also combines that with insights from psychology and behavioral economics.
And he didn't start, this is someone who went to Harvard to study negotiation. So he was already working with, I mean, arguably the top minds in the field,
Yeah.
but he realized that the FBI had a whole different playbook,
Right.
one that focused on the often messy reality
Yeah.
of human emotions.
Exactly. And he saw that this traditional idea of negotiators as purely rational actors, making decisions based solely on logic,
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't how things work in the real world.
Right. And it's like, remember Kahneman and Tversky's work on cognitive biases?
Yes.
It blew that whole rational actor thing out of the water.
Right.
Like, we're all influenced by our emotions biases and past experiences,
Yeah.
even when we think we're being perfectly logical.
All the time. And that's where things get really interesting because the FBI realized this
Yeah.
and they had to adapt, especially after some high-profile tragedies like Waco and Ruby Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
They were dealing with situations where lives were on the line.
Right.
And the old quid pro quo approach just wasn't cutting it.
It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Like, those situations were so emotionally charged.
Totally.
And the FBI's old tactics just weren't equipped to handle that.
Exactly. Voss realized that they needed a new approach, one that acknowledged the power of emotions and used them strategically to de-escalate conflict and find creative solutions. They had to learn how to connect with people on a human level,
Yeah.
even in the most extreme circumstances.
So they needed a new approach.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Voss talks about this idea of tactical empathy.
Right.
It's not just about being nice
Right.
or even empathetic in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's about using empathy as a tool,
Right.
a way to gain trust, gather information, and ultimately influence the outcome of a negotiation.
It's like, imagine you're trying to understand like a really complex machine.
Okay.
You would just look at the outside. You'd want to open it up, see how all the parts work together.
Right.
That's what tactical empathy is all about.
I see.
Understanding the other person's internal mechanisms, their motivations, their fears, their desires.
It's about going beyond just listening. It's really about stepping into their shoes and seeing the world through their eyes.
Totally.
I remember this one time I was having this disagreement with a colleague, and I could tell we were just talking past each other.
Yeah.
So I stopped, and I really tried to see things from their perspective,
Right.
even if I didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It completely changed the tone of the conversation.
That's the power of it, right?
Yeah.
And Voss gives us some really practical tools for putting tactical empathy into action. One of the things he talks about is mirroring. Have you ever noticed how, like, when you're really connecting with someone in a conversation, you might unconsciously start to mirror their body language or their tone
Yeah.
of voice?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's like you're on the same wavelength or something.
Exactly. Voss says we can actually use this mirroring technique intentionally to build rapport and understanding.
Okay.
So, for example, you might subtly mirror the other person's posture or repeat back the last few words they said just to show them you're really paying attention and trying to see things from their side.
So it's not about mimicking them.
Right.
It's more about finding a way to connect with them on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another powerful tool Voss uses is something called labeling. This is where you actually name the emotion that you sense the other person is feeling.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, you might say something like, "It seems like you're feeling frustrated,"
Right.
or "I hear that you're concerned about this."
Now, to some people, that might sound a little forced or artificial,
Sure.
but I can see how, if it's done genuinely,
Yeah,
it could actually be really disarming.
totally.
It's like you're giving them permission to feel their emotions without judgment.
Mm.
And that can be really powerful. In fact, he talks about this really interesting example in his book about this difficult Girl Scout donor.
Oh, yeah. This donor was notoriously tough to deal with.
Yeah.
Kept shooting down all of their fundraising pitches.
Hmm.
Yeah. So instead of getting frustrated or giving up the negotiator, used a label.
Okay.
He said something like, "I'm sensing some hesitation here," or "It seems like you're not quite convinced."
Right.
And that simple act of acknowledging her feelings completely changed the dynamic.
Because up until that point, everyone had been so focused on trying to convince her.
Right.
They hadn't stopped to really listen to her concerns.
Yeah.
And once they did that, they discovered that her hesitation wasn't about being cheap or uncaring.
Yeah.
It was about wanting to make sure her money was being used effectively.
It was about her values,
Right.
her desire to make a real difference.
Right.
And once they understood that, they were able to tailor their pitch in a way that resonated with her.
Okay.
And she ended up making a huge donation.
Wow. That's amazing. It really shows how powerful it can be to shift your focus from trying to win the argument to really understanding where the other person is coming from.
And that's one of the key principles of Voss's approach.
Yeah.
Understanding that emotions are not the enemy in a negotiation.
Okay.
In fact, they can be your greatest asset if you know how to leverage them effectively.
Okay, so we've talked about tactical empathy, mirroring, labeling. These are all about building rapport and understanding.
Right.
But at some point, you've got to actually start talking about what you want.
Right. And this is where things get really interesting because Voss has this really counterintuitive idea about the power of no.
Okay.
He actually says that no is a negotiator's best friend.
Wait, hold on. Did you just say no is a negotiator's best friend?
Yeah.
Isn't the whole point of a negotiation to get to yes?
That's what we've always been taught. Right.
Right.
But Voss makes this really compelling argument that yes can actually be a very superficial word, especially in a negotiation.
Okay.
Think about it. When you're negotiating with someone and they say yes too quickly.
Yeah.
Do you ever get the feeling that maybe they haven't really thought it through?
Yeah, like they're just trying to please you or something.
Exactly.
Yes. Voss says that yes is often a sign of weakness in negotiation.
Okay.
It's a way of avoiding conflict or trying to please the other person. But no, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is a sign of strength. It means you're willing to stand up for what you want, even if it means saying no to something you might otherwise agree to.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So how do you actually use no to your advantage in a negotiation?
Well, one way is to use it to set boundaries.
Right.
For example, let's say someone asks you to do something that you're not comfortable with.
Right.
Instead of saying yes and then feeling resentful later,
Yeah.
you can simply say no and then explain your reasoning.
So it's about being assertive,
Right.
but not aggressive.
Exactly.
You're not saying no to shut down the conversation. You're saying no to open up a dialogue
Right.
and find a solution that works for both of you.
Exactly. And Voss actually gives a really great example in his book about how he used this technique when he was negotiating with a group of bank robbers. Oh, wow. Okay, this should be good. What happened?
So the robbers were demanding a helicopter and $1 million in cash.
Okay.
Obviously, the FBI wasn't just going to give in to their demands,
Right.
but they also didn't want to provoke them.
Yeah, that's a delicate situation.
Right.
So how did they use the power of no in that situation?
Well, instead of just saying no outright, Voss and his team used a technique he calls a calibrated question.
Okay.
This is where you ask a question that forces the other side to really think about their demands
Okay.
and consider alternative solutions.
So, like, what kind of question did they ask the bank robbers?
It was something along the lines of, how do you expect us to get a helicopter into downtown Manhattan on such short notice?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's not about saying no directly. It's about making them realize that their demands are unrealistic or impractical.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that often when you use calibrated questions,
Yeah.
the other side will come up with a more reasonable solution on their own.
That's fascinating. It's like you're guiding them towards a solution
Right.
without them even realizing it.
Exactly. And it's a lot more effective than just saying no,
Mm.
which can often make people defensive and less likely to cooperate.
This is all so eye-opening. I
Yeah.
feel like we've all been approaching negotiation the wrong way.
It's true.
But there's more, right? What about those black swans you mentioned earlier?
Right. Those crucial pieces of information that can completely change the game.
Yeah.
Voss says that finding black swans is often the key to unlocking a truly great negotiation.
Okay, but how do you actually find these black swans? It seems like they're called unknown unknowns for a reason.
Exactly. It's not like you can just go into a negotiation with a checklist
Right,
and expect to find all the black swans.
right.
It's more about being observant, asking the right questions, and listening between the lines.
So it's about being really present and
Yes.
paying attention to everything,
Yes.
even the things that might seem insignificant at first.
Exactly. Voss says that one of the best ways to uncover black swans is to focus on the other person's religion.
Their religion. Wait, I thought we were talking about negotiation, not spirituality.
Right. It
Those are-
sounds strange, but he's not talking about actual religion here.
Okay.
He's using the term metaphorically
Okay.
to refer to a person's deeply held beliefs and values,
Nice.
the things that really drive their decision-making.
Oh, I see. It's like understanding their core motivations.
Yes,
The why behind their what.
exactly. And often those core motivations are not immediately obvious.
Right.
You have to dig a little deeper, ask the right questions, and listen carefully to their responses.
This reminds me of that example you mentioned earlier about the hostage situation in Washington, D.C. with Dwight Watson and the tractor.
Right.
Right.
In that case, the black swan was understanding that Watson's actions weren't driven by typical criminal motives.
Right.
He wasn't after money or fame.
Right.
He was a farmer who felt like his voice wasn't being heard.
Right.
And he was desperate to bring attention to the plight of American farmers.
And by understanding his religion, his deeply held belief in the importance of farming and the struggles that farmers were facing, Voss was able to find a way to connect with him and negotiate a peaceful resolution.
Exactly. And it's not just in hostage situations where this applies.
Right.
Understanding the other person's religion can be crucial in any negotiation.
Yeah.
Whether you're negotiating a business deal, a salary increase, or even just what to have for dinner.
This has been incredible. We've covered so much ground, from tactical empathy and the power of no to calibrated questions and black swans. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for approaching negotiation,
Yeah.
and I bet our listeners do too.
Me too. And you know the best part is?
What's that?
These techniques aren't just useful for negotiating with other people. You can use them to negotiate with yourself too.
Oh, that's a good point. Like when you're trying to convince yourself to get out of bed early and go for a run.
Exactly. Or when you're trying to stick to a budget
Right.
or break a bad habit.
Yeah.
These principles can help you become a more effective negotiator in all areas of your life.
So to wrap things up, if there's one thing our listeners can take away from today's deep dive, it's that negotiation is not about winning or losing.
That's right.
It's about understanding connection and finding creative solutions that work for everyone involved.
I love that.
And with the right tools and mindset, anyone can become a master negotiator.
Absolutely. It's about seeing every interaction as an opportunity for collaboration and growth.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder this. What's one area of your life where you could use a little more negotiation mastery? Until next time, happy negotiating.